The Loretta Young Show.
Thank you, Tia. Howdy. This is Recaps with Lou Aaron Getty. I will recap the first episode of her show. Whose show, you ask? Tia, can you help me out here?
The Loretta Young Show.
Thanks, Tia. We'll hear more from Tia Marie Beverly a little later in the show. Loretta starts the program by entering the room with her trademark twirl through the door and reveals an elegant outfit. Loretta Young explains that she has received a letter from a real person, we'll call her Carol Brown, who works at a department store in New York City. Loretta informs the audience she will dramatize the contents of the letter, and so the show begins.
The Loretta Young Show.
Thank you, Tia. One day, a man named Keith came to buy perfume. Carol offers him some perfume to smell. It was called Angel Face. The man looked at her again, and she was now in an angel costume. The man was confused and left. Keith became a regular visitor at the perfume counter. Carol showed him another perfume called Balinese Dreams. He looked at her again, wearing a Balinese crown, and decides to buy it. Later, Keith requests to buy another perfume, and Carol then was seen in a wedding gown. He takes that as a cue to ask her to marry him, and she says yes. They decide to take the train to Philadelphia to meet his family. Keith doesn't help the situation and basically warns Carol, saying that they are very judgmental. This makes Carol nervous, and she asks Keith for a kiss. Arriving at the home in Philadelphia where they met Jenny the maid, who said dinner will be served at 7. After, Keith asks Jenny to take Carol on a tour of the house while he goes to meet his mother. Jenny makes Carol uncomfortable, so Carol decides to look for a cigarette once Jenny leaves. She was just about to smoke, but after looking at a family portrait on the wall, she decides against it. In the other room, Keith had to endure listening to his mother as she called Carol strange. Keith reminded his mom that this is the girl he intends to marry. Keith went to meet Carol before the dinner, and she was expressing her feelings of doubt about her choice in clothing. Keith assures her she will be fine. Carol was finished putting on her dress when Barbara, a former flame of Keith, enters the room. Barbara obviously has a hidden agenda and wants to make Carol uncomfortable, insinuating that since Carol was just a shop girl in New York City, she would not fit in high society here in Philadelphia. However, Carol was so confident that Keith will marry her that she feels she could use bad manners and act poorly at the dinner. And Keith will marry her anyways, so that is what she'll do. And Carol tells Barbara to keep her plan a secret. Before the dinner, Carol makes a bold entrance, going around the room joking inappropriately with the family. She seemed to make a big impression on Keith's Uncle Charles, and she was introduced to Barbara again and jokingly mentions that they share a secret. She goes on to ask for an alcoholic drink. Mrs. Warren asks Keith then to go get drinks before dinner starts at 7. Carol immediately wants to know how close it is to 7, so she sits down and quickly crosses her legs, revealing her wristwatch on her leg. Mrs. Warren asks why she wears her watch like that. Carol said it was so it wouldn't get wet as she washed her hands. Mrs. Warren changes the topic and asks where she spends her summer, and she says she sunbathes on the rooftop of her house. Barbara makes a snide remark asking if she was afraid of planes up there. She replied that as long as if they are not Russian planes. Barbara decides to leave, complaining of a headache. After Barbara leaves, Carol gets a cigarette and proceeds to blow several smoke bubbles. Mrs. Warren goes on to ask where Carol met Keith. She says provocatively that it was while buying a perfume bottle called Kiss in the Dark. All the guests are offended and leave. Carol tries to apologize, but Mrs. Warren is not happy and says she will not give her blessing to the marriage and will cut him off financially if he decides to marry Carol. Keith's mom thinks he wouldn't survive long in New York City and would come crawling back to Philadelphia. Carol argued otherwise. They both agreed for Carol to leave to see where Keith's loyalty was, so she was taken back to the train station. But Keith goes looking for Carol immediately, and they are reunited on the train. And so the show ends. Loretta wraps up the program by reading a letter from Carol, which asks Loretta if she was in the wrong. Loretta's simple advice is that Mrs. Warren has the right to get to know Carol and find out for herself why Keith loves her. Loretta ends with words of wisdom from the Bible. Tia, would you do the honors and read from the book of Proverbs, please?
House and wealth are an inheritance from fathers, but a sensible wife is a gift from the Lord.
Thanks for listening to Recaps with Lou Aaron Getty. Take care.
Goodbye and God bless.